Okay, here we go. 42. Cross and the crucifixion in pagan and Christian mysteries. Where are the get a picture? Oh, history of the Holy Cross. Adam directing Seth how to reach the Garden of Eden. That was number 1. 2. Seth placing 3 seeds from the tree of life under the tongue of the dead Adam. That's 2. 3. The Queen of Sheba refusing to place her feet upon the sacred tree, forded the stream. 4. Placing the sacred tree over the door of Solomon's temple. 5. The crucifixion of Christ upon a cross made from the wood of the holy tree. 6. Distinguishing the true cross from the other 2 by testing its power to raise a corpse to life. One of the most interesting legends concerning the cross is that preserved in Aurea Legenda by Jacobus de Vorgane. The story is to the effect that Adam, feeling the end of his life was near, entreated his son Seth to make a pilgrimage to the Garden of Eden and secure from the angel on guard at the entrance of the oil of mercy which God had promised mankind. Seth did not know the way, but his father told him it was in an eastward direction and the path would be easy to follow, for when Adam and Eve were banished from the garden of the Lord upon the path which their feet had trod, the grass had never grown. Seth, following the directions of his father, discovered the Garden of Eden without difficulty. The angel who guarded the gate permitted him to enter, and in the midst of the garden Seth beheld a great tree, the branches of which reached up to heaven. The tree was in the form of a cross and stood on the brink of a precipice which led downward into the depths of hell. Among the roots of the tree he saw the body of his brother Cain, held prisoner by the entwining limbs. The angel refused to give Seth the oil of mercy, but presented him instead with 3 seeds from the tree of life, some say the tree of knowledge. With these Seth returned to his father, who was so overjoyed that he did not desire to live longer. 3 days later he died, and the 3 seeds were buried in his mouth as the angel had instructed. The seeds became a sapling with tree trunks in one, which absorbed into itself the blood of Adam, so that the life of Adam was in the tree. Noah dug up this tree by the roots and took it with him into the ark. After the waters subsided, he buried the skull of Adam under Mount Calvary and planted the tree on the summit of Mount Lebanon. Moses beheld a visionary being in the midst of this tree, the burning bush, and from it cut the magical rod with which he was able to bring water out of a stone. But because he failed to call upon the Lord the second time he struck the rock, he was not permitted to carry the sacred staff into the promised land. So he planted it in the hills of Moab. After much searching, King David discovered the tree, and his son Solomon tried to use it for a pillar in his temple. But his carpenters could not cut it so that it would fit. It was always either too long or too short. At last, disgusted, they cast it aside and used it for a bridge to connect Jerusalem with the surrounding hills. When the Queen of Sheba came to visit King Solomon, she was expected to walk across the bridge. Instead, she beheld the tree. She refused to put her foot upon it, but after kneeling and praying, removed her sandals and forded the stream. This so impressed King Solomon that he ordered the log to be overlaid with golden plates and placed above the door of his temple. There it remained until his covetous grandson stole the gold and buried the tree so that the crime would not be discovered. From the ground where the tree was buried, there immediately bubbled forth a spring of water which became known as Bethsaida. To it, the sick from all Syria came to be healed. The angel of the poor became the guardian of the tree, and it remained undisturbed for many years. Eventually, the log floated to the surface and was used as a bridge again, this time between Calvary and Jerusalem, and over it Jesus passed to be crucified. There was no wood on Calvary, so the tree was cut into 2 parts to serve as the cross upon which the Son of Man was crucified. The cross was set up at the very spot where the skull of Adam had been buried. Later, when the cross was discovered by the Empress Helena, the Wood was found to be of 4 different varieties contained in one tree, representing the elements, and thereafter the cross continued to heal all the sick who were permitted to touch it. The prevalent idea that the reverence for the cross is limited to the Christian world is disproved by even the most superficial investigation of its place in religious symbolism. The early Christians used every means possible to conceal the pagan origin of their symbols, doctrines, and rituals. They either destroyed the sacred books of other peoples among whom they settled, or made them inaccessible to students of comparative philosophy, apparently believing that in this way they could stamp out all record of the pre-Christian origin of their doctrines. In some cases, the writings of various ancient authors were tampered with, passages of a compromising nature being removed of foreign material interpolated. The supposedly spurious passage of Josephus concerning Jesus is an example adduced to illustrate this proclivity. The Lost Libraries of Alexandria. Prior to the Christian era, 700,000 of the most valuable books written upon parchment, papyrus, vellum, and wax, and also tablets of stone, terracotta, and wood, were gathered from all parts of the ancient world and housed in Alexandria, in buildings specially prepared for the purpose. This magnificent repository of knowledge was destroyed by a series of 3 fires. The parts that escaped the conflagration lighted by Caesar to destroy the fleet in the harbor were destroyed about AD 389 by the Christians in obedience to the edict of Theodosius, who had ordered the destruction of the Serapeum, a building sacred to Serapis in which the volumes were kept. This conflagration is supposed to have destroyed the library that Marcus Antonius had presented to Cleopatra to compensate in part for that burned in the fire of the year 51. Concerning this, H.P. Blavatsky, in Isis Unveiled, has written, "They, the rabbis of Palestine and the wise men, say that not all the rolls and manuscripts reported in history to have been burned by Caesar by the Christian mob in 389 and by the Arab general Amru perished as it is commonly believed, and the story they tell is the following. At the time of the contest for the throne in 51 BC between Cleopatra and her brother Dionysus Ptolemy, the Bruchian, which contained over 700,000 rolls, all bound in wood and fireproof parchment, was undergoing repairs, and a great portion of the original manuscripts, considered among the most precious, and which were not duplicated, were stored away in the home of one of the librarians. Several hours passed between the burning of the fleet set on fire by Caesar's order and the moment when the first buildings situated near the harbor caught fire in their turn, and the librarians, aided by several hundred slaves attached to the museum, succeeded in saving the most precious of the scrolls. In all probability, the books which were saved lie buried either in Egypt or in India, and until they are discovered, the modern world must remain in ignorance concerning many great philosophical and mystical truths." Great. The ancient world more clearly understood these missing links the continuity of the pagan mysteries in Christianity. The cross in pagan symbolism. In this article on the cross and crucifixion in the Encyclopedia Britannica, Thomas McCall Follow casts much light on the antiquity of this ideograph. The use of the cross as a religious symbol in pre-Christian times and among non-Christian peoples may probably be regarded as almost universal, and in very many cases it was connected with some form of nature worship. Not only is the cross itself a familiar object in the art of all nations, but the veneration for it is an essential part of the religious life of the greater part of humanity. It is a common symbol among the American Indians, North, Central, and South. William W. Seymour states the Aztec goddess of rain bore a cross in her hand, and the Toltecs claimed that their deity Quetzalcoatl taught them to sign and ritual of the cross, hence his staff or sepulchre of power resembled a crosier, and his mantle was covered with red crosses. The cross in tradition, history, and art. The cross is also highly revered by the Japanese and Chinese. To the Pythagoreans, the most sacred of all numbers was the 10, the symbol of which is an X or cross. In both the Japanese and Chinese languages, the characters of the number 10 is a cross. The Buddhist wheel of life is composed of 2 crosses superimposed, and its 8 points are still preserved in Christendom in the peculiarly formed cross of the Knights Templars, which is essentially Buddhistic. India has preserved the cross not only in its carvings and paintings, but also in its architectonics. A great number of its temples, like the churches and cathedrals of Christendom, are raised from cruciform foundations. On the mandalas of the Tibetans, heaven is laid out in the form of a cross with a demon king at each of the 4 gates. A remarkable cross of great antiquity was discovered in the island caves of Elephanta in the harbor of Bombay. Crosses of various kinds were favorite motifs in the art of Chaldea, Phoenicia, Egypt, and Assyria. The initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece were given a cross which they suspended about their necks on a chain or cord at the time of initiation. To the Rosicrucians, alchemists, and Illuminati, the cross was the symbol of light because each of the 3 letters, LVX, is derived from some parts of the cross. All right. Well, how do I go to the next one? There it is. All right. The Tau cross. The Tau cross was the sign which the Lord told the people of Jerusalem to mark upon their foreheads as related by the prophet Ezekiel. It was also placed as a symbol of liberation upon those charged with crimes but acquitted. The Tau cross. There are 3 distinct forms of the cross. The first is called the Tau, more correctly the Tav. It closely resembles the modern letter T, consisting of a horizontal bar resting on a vertical column, the 2 arms being of equal length. An oak tree cut off some feet above the ground and its upper part laid across the lower in this form was the symbol of the Druid god Hu. It is suspected that this symbol originated among the Egyptians from the spread of the horns of a bull or ram, Taurus or Aries, and the vertical line of its face. This is sometimes designated as the hammer cross because if held by its vertical base, it is not unlike a mallet or gavel. In one of the Kabbalistic Masonic legends, Hiram Abiff is given a hammer in the form of a Tau by his ancestor, Tubal-Cain. The Tau cross is preserved to modern masonry under the symbol of the T-square. This appears to be the oldest form of the cross extant. The Tau cross was inscribed on the forehead of every person admitted into the mysteries of Mithras. When a king was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries, the Tau was placed against his lips. It was tattooed upon the bodies of the candidates in some of the American Indian mysteries. To the Kabbalist, the Tau stood for heaven and the Pythagorean tetrax. The caduceus of Hermes was an outgrowth of the Tau cross. See Albert Pike. Where are we at now? The crux ansata. The crux ansata, both the cross and the circle were phallic symbols, for the ancient world venerated the generative powers of nature by being expressive in the creative attributes of the deity. The crux ansata, by combining the masculine Tau with the feminine oval, exemplified the principles of generation. The second type was that of a T or Tau cross surmounted by a circle, often foreshortened to the form of an upright oval. This was called by the ancients the crux ansata, or the cross of life. It was the key to the mysteries of antiquity, and it probably gave rise to the more modern story of St. Peter's golden key to heaven. In the mysteries of Egypt, the candidate passed through all forms of actual imaginary dangers, holding above his head the crux ansata, before which the powers of darkness fell back abashed. The student is reminded of the words, "In hoc signo vinces." The Tau form of the cross is not unlike the seal of Venus, as Richard Payne Knight has noted. He states, the cross in this form is sometimes observable on coins, and several of them were found in the temple of Serapis, the Serapum, demolished at the general destruction of those edifices by the Emperor Theodosius, and were said by the Christian antiquaries of that time to signify the future life. Augustus Le Plogian, in the Sacred Mysteries among the Mayas and Kitches, notes that the crux ansata, which he calls the key to the Nile and the symbol of symbols, either in its complete form or as a simple tau, was to be seen adorning the breasts of statues and bas reliefs at Palenque, and throughout Central America. He notes that it was always associated with water, that among the Babylonians it was the emblem of the water gods, among the Scandinavians of heaven and mortality, and among the Mayas of rejuvenation and freedom from physical suffering. Concerning the association of this symbol with the waters of life, Count Goblet de Alavalia, in his Migration of Symbols, calls attention to the fact that an instrument resembling the crux ansata and called the nilometer was used by the ancient Egyptians for measuring and regulating the inundations of the river Nile. It is probable that this relationship to the Nile caused it to be considered the symbol of life, for Egypt depended entirely upon the inundations of this river for the irrigation necessary to ensure sufficient crops. In the papyrus scrolls, the crux ansata is shown issuing from the mouths of Egyptian kings when they pardoned enemies, and it was buried with them to signify the immortality of the soul. It was carried by many of the gods and goddesses and apparently signified their divine benevolence and life-giving power. The Cairo Museum contains a magnificent collection of crosses of many shapes, sizes, and designs, proving that they were a common symbol among the Egyptians. The Roman and Greek Catholic crosses. The third form of the cross is the familiar Roman or Greek type, which is closely associated with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, although it is improbable that the cross used resembles its more familiar modern form. There are unlimited sub-varieties of crosses differing in the relative proportions of their vertical and horizontal sections. Among the secret orders of different generations, we find compounded crosses such as the triple tau in the Royal Arch of Freemasonry and the double and triple crosses of both Masonic and Roman Catholic symbolism. To the Christian, the cross has a twofold significance. First, it is the symbol of the death of his Redeemer, through whose martyrdom he feels that he partakes of the glory of God. Secondly, it is the symbol of humility, patience, and the burden of life. It is interesting that the cross should be both a symbol of life and a symbol of death. Many nations deeply considered the astronomical aspect of the religion, and it is probable that the Persians, Greeks, and Hindus looked upon the cross as a symbol of equinoxes and solstices, in the belief that at certain seasons of the year the sun was symbolically crucified upon these imaginary celestial angels. The fact that so many nations have regarded their Savior as the personification of the sun globe is convincing evidence that the cross must exist as an astronomical element in pagan allegory. Augustus Le Plogian believed that the veneration for the cross was partly due to the rising of the constellation called the Southern Cross, which immediately preceded the annual rains, and as the natives of those latitudes relied wholly upon these rains to raise their crops, they viewed the cross as an annual promise of the approaching storms, which to them meant life. There are four basic elements, according to both ancient philosophy and modern science, and the ancients represented them by the four arms of the cross, placing at the end of each arm a mysterious Kabbalistic creature to symbolize the power of one of these elements. Thus, they symbolize the element of earth by a bull, water by a scorpion, a serpent or an eagle, fire by a lion, and air by a human head surrounded by wings. It is significant that the four letters inscribed upon parchment, some say wood, and fastened to the top of the cross at the time of the crucifixion should be the first letters of four Hebrew words which stand for the four elements. Ayman, the sea or water, Nor, fire, Roch, or rock, the air, and Ebed-Shah, the dry earth. See Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. That a cross can be formed by opening or unfolding the surfaces of a cube has caused that symbol to be associated with the earth. Though a cross within a circle has long been regarded as a sign of the planet Earth, it should really be considered as the symbol of the composite element Earth, since it is composed of the four triangles of the elements. For thousands of years, the cross has been identified with the plan of salvation for humanity. The elements salt, sulfur, mercury, and azoth used in making the philosopher's stone in alchemy were often symbolized by a cross. The cross of the four cardinal angles also had its secret significance, and Masonic parties of three still go forth to the four cardinal points of the compass in search of the lost world. The material of which the cross was formed was looked upon as being an essential element in its symbolism. Thus, a gold cross symbolized illumination, a silver cross, purification, a cross of base metal, humiliation, a cross of wood, aspiration. The fact that among many nations it was customary to spread the arms in prayer has influenced the symbolism of the cross, which, because its shape, has come to be regarded as emblematic of the human body. The four major divisions of the human structure, bones, muscles, nerves, and arteries, are considered to have contributed to the symbolism of the cross. This is especially due to the fact that the spinal nerves cross at the base of the spine and is a reminder that our Lord was crucified also in Egypt. Man has four vehicles or mediums of expression by means of which the spiritual ego contacts the external universe: the physical nature, the vital nature, the emotional nature, and the mental nature. Each of these partakes in principle of one of the primary elements, and the four creatures assigned to them by the Kabbalists cause the cross to be symbolic of the compound nature of man. Maybe we should end it today. Yeah. That's enough. Here's the thing.